Have you ever actually stopped to wonder how we measure human value? Well, let's just dive right into this explainer. Today, we're exploring a seriously groundbreaking white paper by Moses Sam Paul Johnraj. It's called Observer Attention is All You Need. We're going to unpack how we measure human becoming and value creation by fundamentally shifting what we choose to pay attention to. Because, as the paper argues, and this is key, every measurement system begins with attention. I mean, before something can be counted, or priced, or governed, an observer has to first decide that it's even worth noticing.
So, to really understand how we measure value, we first have to look at language and how we observe things. Let's start with a puzzle presented in the paper. Imagine a teacher writes a sentence on the board. The trophy did not fit in the suitcase because it was too small. Now, when you read that, what exactly was too small? You know automatically, your brain just answers, the suitcase.
But think about what happens if we change just one single word. If the sentence says, the trophy did not fit in the suitcase because it was too large, the answer suddenly flips to the trophy. And this is brilliant because it illustrates that meaning doesn't just magically appear from the words themselves. It appears when our attention selects the relevant relationship between them. This is actually the simple human intuition behind the Transformer AI architecture, a literal game changer that helps machines finally understand language by calculating which tokens matter in relation to others.
We're going to use that machine learning breakthrough as a conceptual bridge, not as a biological equivalent, right? But just as a bridge to ask what human civilization should actually pay attention to. To do that, we'll follow a clear roadmap. First, defining the time slice. Second, exploring the value capture protocol. Third, calculating scoped value. And finally, rebuilding human value through strict ethical boundaries.
Okay, part 1, defining the time slice, our candidate unit of analysis. To start building out this framework, we first need to figure out the exact unit we should be using when studying human value creation. Because if attention precedes measurement, we have to ask, what exactly are we measuring?
Think about how we usually track time. The paper proposes something called the observed human time slice as our fundamental unit of analysis for studying value creation. Before any human action can be priced or governed at all, we have to capture this bounded time slice. Think of it kind of like a snapshot. Say, 10 minutes spent helping a neighbor versus 10 minutes of paid work. And notice the strict requirements for this research architecture to work. It absolutely has to be built on context, evidence, an observer's role, and most importantly, consent. It's a fully testable unit of analysis for capturing events and attention.
Now, the really crucial point here is that not all time slices are created equal. The framework explicitly distinguishes between two main types. You've got performance slices, which are events that might activate community validation and pricing. But then you have non-performance slices, which are totally different. These simply update a person's well-being state without ever activating pricing. And that is huge, because it prevents absolutely everything a human does from being turned into a financial transaction.
Moving on to Section 2, the value capture protocol and the journey of a data point. Now that we have our basic unit defined, what actually happens to it? How does a single moment get processed through this entire architecture?
Let's just trace the actual journey of a data point right through the protocol stack. It goes like this. First, an event happens and is captured. Second, its developmental meaning for that specific individual is interpreted. Third, if it happens to be a performance event, its community contribution is conditionally validated. And finally, the selected consequences are recorded straight to an individual's identity.
Let's break that stack down a bit further, layer by layer. The value capture protocol is your entry point. It captures the event itself. Next up, the well-becoming protocol steps in to interpret the developmental meaning. This is where personal context really informs the interpretation. Then we hit the SAO commons. You can think of this as a shared community space, a conditional gateway for validating collective contribution. And finally, the well-being identity layer records these consequences. The cool part? It keeps them fully revisable and under selective disclosure. That means the user is always in control of their own data. Notice how carefully personal context is interpreted before it ever even reaches the commons for any sort of collective validation.
That brings us to part 3, calculating scoped value, or the mathematics of performance. So what happens when we actually apply math to these moments? Let's dive into how the system treats those specific performance time slices once they make it past that conditional gateway we were just talking about.
When a performance slice does activate community validation, it relies on a very specific scoped value equation. Basically, it's multiplying weight, community value, in time, and this gives us a bounded mathematical interpretation of value creation over a specific period. Now, obviously, this requires immense evidence and serious calibration before any sort of operational use. We want to ensure that value isn't just some abstract guess, but a precise, highly contextual calculation rooted in actual time spent and real community contribution.
But remember, and honestly, I cannot stress this enough based on the paper's findings, the architecture absolutely does not force everything into a transaction. Non-performance events bypass the math entirely. They do not activate community pricing. However, they still crucially update human well-being. So the system really respects that vital boundary between a messy, contextual human life and cold, deterministic mathematical pricing.
Establishing those boundaries brings us perfectly to our final section, rebuilding human value. Here, we'll clarify the actual boundaries and ethical limits of this entire research framework. Because, with any system that measures human activity, establishing what it is explicitly not is just as important as establishing what it is.
The author makes it incredibly clear that we are not looking at some dystopian sci-fi concept here. This architecture is explicitly not a universal unit of value meant to just replace all economics. It's not a validated absolute well-being score. And, most importantly, it is definitely not a totalizing social ranking system. It actively, purposely avoids becoming a system of metric failure or unchecked surveillance.
Instead, what this brilliantly illustrates is a testable research program, one designed to ensure that the way we observe and measure value is transparent, ethical, and entirely dependent on human context. It's all about making observation explicit. It's about ensuring every single data point is rooted in consent. And by making the whole system falsifiable, it opens the door for real, rigorous fieldwork and continuous improvement in how we actually understand value creation.
As we wrap up this explainer, we return to the very foundation of the white paper. The Transformer AI changed absolutely everything by teaching machines how to pay attention to the relationships between words. Now, the Internet of Value Research Foundation is asking us to do the exact same thing for society. So I will leave you with this defining question. If attention truly precedes measurement, what will you choose to pay attention to next in order to measure human becoming?